Surprise, on my birthday, my son left a letter on the table. My sister said, "Don't read it. Birthdays get quieter when you outlive the people who used to sing to you." The morning I turned 72. Surprise. The house was too neat, the kitchen too clean, as if it were bracing for company that might not come. I brewed coffee in Linda's old percolator and set one cup across from me out of habit. Surprise. I still do that, make room for someone who isn't late so much as permanently early to a different place. My sister Rosa was bringing over a store-bought cake at noon. My son Michael, Prize, had texted the night before. "Lunch tomorrow. Won't be long. Got a meeting." He used to bring me cards when he was small, marker bleeding through the paper, words crooked and honest. These days his messages arrive like calendar invites, short, efficient, easy to decline. At 11:58 the screen door clicked. Michael didn't knock. Prize. He set a small white envelope on the kitchen table like you might set down a bill you didn't want to think about, and kiss the air near my cheek. He smelled like cold air and expensive cologne. Prize. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, eyes already drifting toward the door. "I can't stay. You drove all this way to drop an envelope?" I asked, half smiling to make it sound like a joke. "It explains," he said, which is a sentence that never explains anything. "Please just read it later." He left before the percolator finished its second gurgle. Prize. The envelope sat in the middle of the table, perfectly centered as if he'd measured the distance to each edge. Rosa arrived 2 minutes after he was gone, her arms full of cake and noise. Prize. She kissed my forehead, opened cabinets that didn't need opening, and asked too many questions like sisters do when they're trying to drown out the quiet. Then she saw it, the envelope. Prize. She went still in that way family goes still when a memory walks into the room. "Who brought that? Michael." "What did he say?" That it explains. Rosa set the cake down like it might break. Prize. She looked at the envelope, then at me, and I watched something move behind her eyes, worry, maybe, or recognition. "Don't read it," she said softly.
Prize, can't you see? See what?
She shook her head the way you do when the words won't line up. "Just don't. Not yet." The kettle whistled. The clock ticked. Outside, Prize, a delivery truck hissed to a stop, and then kept going. Inside, the envelope stayed very white against the old oak grain of the table, the way snow looks clean until you step in it. Surprise, I've spent a life building things, houses, porches, a family, and there's a particular moment right before a beam gives when you feel the structure hesitate. That's what the room felt like. Prize, that hush of hesitation. Something was about to shift. I slid the envelope toward me with 2 fingers. It felt heavier than paper should. Rosa touched my wrist. "Please," she whispered. Prize. "Let me make the coffee first." I stared at her hand. My little sister's hands used to fit inside my palm. Now they had lines of their own, a cartography of all the places we'd survived. Prize, I wanted to tell her I was too old to be protected. I wanted to tell her I had earned my pain fair and square. Instead, I nodded. "Coffee first." The envelope waited between us like a third person who'd finally decided to speak. Rosa poured the coffee slow. Prize. Like maybe if she stalled long enough the day would fold back on itself and Michael would still be standing there, explaining in person instead of in ink. Prize. She set my cup down and slid into the chair opposite me. "Do you remember?" she said. "When Dad got that letter from the bank?" I did. 45 years ago. Prize. The bank had sent my father a notice that the farm might be taken if he didn't make up the payments. He'd opened it at the kitchen table, right where I sat now. Prize. And the sound of paper tearing had felt like the start of winter. "This isn't like that," I said, though I didn't know if it was true. I picked up the envelope. Surprise. My name was written in Michael's careful block letters, like the way a child writes when they've practiced too hard to get it wrong. I tore the flap. Inside, a single folded sheet. I unfolded it. Prize, and the smell hit me first. Not paper, but something chemical, faintly metallic, like fresh ink on glossy stock. The first line, "Dad, by the time you read this, things will have changed." I kept reading. Prize. Each sentence was clipped, like he'd trimmed the edges off his feelings. He wrote that the house was now in his name, that the mortgage had been refinanced. Prize. That it was more practical this way, because I shouldn't have to worry about maintenance at my age. He wrote that I'd be more comfortable in the assisted living place near his office. Surprise. No question marks, no invitation to discuss. Just decisions already made. The last paragraph was the one that caught my breath. "I know you'll understand someday. You've always told me family comes first." Prize, this is me putting my family first. I looked up at Rosa. Her eyes said she'd guessed it before I even opened it. "He took the house," I said, not quite believing my own voice. Rosa reached across, Prize, her fingers wrapping mine. "Not just the house," she said. The savings, too. Something cold moved through me. Not anger, not yet, surprise. Just that hollow space where you set down trust and realize someone's walked off with it. Michael's letter lay between us, the edges curling slightly. Surprise, as if even the paper didn't want to hold his words for long. Rosa's thumb traced the back of my hand. I told you not to read it, she said, voice breaking. I stared at the lines on the paper. Surprise. The tidy handwriting that no longer belonged to the boy who used to sign my birthday cards with "Love you, Dad" in uneven crayon. For the first time that morning, the cake on the counter seemed absurd. Surprise. What was there to celebrate when the walls around you weren't yours anymore? Outside, the wind rattled the porch swing. Inside, something older than wind rattled me. Surprise, Rosa didn't let go of my hand right away. She just sat there watching me the way you watch a storm you can't stop, waiting to see which way the wind will turn. I'm sorry, she said. Surprise, I should have told you sooner. I saw the papers last month. I kept my voice low because raising it would make it real. What papers? The refinance documents. Surprise, I ran into Janet, your daughter-in-law, at the bank. She was signing them. I turned toward the window because the muscles in my face didn't trust themselves. Janet, Prize, with her perfect hair and perfect smile, standing at the same counter I used to visit to deposit the checks from 40 years of work. You didn't think to call me? I asked. Prize. I did think to, Rosa said. But I also knew Michael would tell you it was all above board, and you'd believe him because you've always believed him. Her words landed heavier than the letter. Surprise, I had believed him. Through the missed college classes, through the start and stop jobs, through the divorce that was somehow everyone's fault but his. Belief was my default setting. Prize, he's my son, I said, the words tasting like they belonged to another century. Rosa leaned back, folded her arms. And you're his father. That used to mean something to him. Prize, now it's just a source of leverage. The coffee on the table had gone cold. I tried to picture Michael that morning walking into my kitchen. The way he didn't meet my eyes. Prize, that has the way he placed the letter so precisely. Was that guilt or calculation? What's the assisted living place near his office? I asked finally. Rosa hesitated. It's not bad. Surprise, it's also not where you belong. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Because she was right, I had built my home board by board, painted it with my own hands. Every creak in the floor was a memory. Surprise, every nail knew my grip. And now, with the neat fold of a letter, it was gone outside. A car door slammed, too sharp, too close. My stomach tightened. Rosa glanced toward the sound. Prize. That's him. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Whatever conversation was about to happen, I wanted to look my son in the eye for it. Prize. Michael stepped into the kitchen without knocking again. Same cologne, same polished shoes, but this time his eyes darted between me and the letter still on the table. I see you read it, he said. Surprise. No question mark. I didn't tear away. I let the silence stretch, the way you stretch a rope to see if it will snap. Dad, he started, this is for the best. You'll be closer to me, Prize, closer to the grandkids. You won't have to worry about. About what? I cut in. About living in the house I built with my own hands. Prize. About paying for the roof over your family's head. He winced, but only slightly, like a man adjusting his tie, not like someone hit in the gut. It's not like that, he said. Prize. The upkeep is too much for you. And the savings, well, they're being put to better use. Rosa shifted in her chair. Better use than the man who earned them. Michael ignored her. Surprise. I'm taking care of you, Dad. This is what taking care looks like now. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table. No, Michael. Prize, this is what taking control looks like. Something flickered in his expression. Irritation, maybe, or the faintest hint of shame. But it was gone before I could name it. I have a meeting, he said, Prize, glancing at his watch. The moving company will be here in 2 weeks. I'll help you pack. And just like that, he turned toward the door. You've already taken the house, I called after him. Prize, or don't take my dignity too. He paused in the doorway, his back to me. Think about the grandkids, he said and left. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was heavy, surprise, like wet cement waiting to set. Rosa reached for my coffee cup, but I covered it with my hand. Leave it, I said. I'm not done yet. That night I didn't sleep. Surprise. Not because of anger, though there was enough of that to fuel a war, but because I kept hearing Linda's voice in my head. When you build something, you build it to last. Surprise. And if someone tries to take it apart, you better know how to hold it together. I rose before dawn, the sky still that pre-morning gray. At the kitchen table, surprise. I pulled out the old metal box where I kept the things Michael never bothered to ask about. Property deeds, tax receipts, the yellowed blueprints of the house, with my handwriting in the margins. Prize. Rosa came in around 8 carrying groceries and questions. "You're up early," she said. "I've got work to do," I replied. Prize, spreading the documents across the table like a general laying out a battle plan. She set down the bag and leaned over my shoulder. "You're not, letting this go. Prize, are you? Not a chance." I spent the next 3 days making calls. First to my old friend Hank, who still knew half the clerks at the county recorder's office. Prize. Then to a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in a decade, a man who'd once gotten me out of a land dispute when a developer tried to muscle in on my backlot. Prize. "Looks like your son's been creative," the lawyer said after reviewing the papers. "But not airtight. We might have something." By the end of the week, I had a list. Surprise, stop all automatic payments tied to Michael. File a formal dispute on the transfer of the deed. Secure the savings account with a password only I knew. Rosa watched me work, half smiling, half worried. Prize. "You're not just fighting for the house, are you?" she asked. I looked at her. "No. I'm fighting for the right to decide what happens to me." That night, as I locked away the papers, surprise, I realized something. Michael thought the letter was the end of the story. He had no idea it was the opening chapter. In the days that followed, the letter stayed in the top drawer of my desk. Not as a wound, prize, but as a reminder. Every time I opened it to reach for a pen or a paperclip, the envelope's edge brushed my fingers like a tap on the shoulder, whispering, "Don't you dare forget." I didn't. Prize. I found myself thinking less about the bricks and wood of the house, and more about the years that had filled it. The birthdays, the Christmas mornings, prize, the nights Michael fell asleep on the couch with his head on my lap while Linda read by the fire. Those memories were mine, untouchable, immune to signatures and deeds. Prize. But dignity could be taken if you didn't guard it. Rosa and I started walking the property line every evening, like we used to when the kids were small. She'd talk about nothing and everything, prize, and I'd listen, cataloging every sound. The creak of the gate, the wind through the maple trees, because I didn't know how many more evenings I'd have here. One night, prize, she stopped halfway down the path and said, "You know he's going to push back, right? He won't like that you're fighting." I smiled, surprise, the kind of smile you give when you've already made your peace with the road ahead. Let him push. I thought about Michael as a boy learning to ride his bike. I'd run beside him, surprise, holding the seat until he found his balance. Then I'd let go, knowing he might fall. Maybe I'd been holding the seat of his life for too long. The house wasn't just lumber and nails. It was my anchor, prize. But if he thought he could pull it out from under me without a fight, he was about to learn something new about his father. I stood there, the porch light throwing a warm circle on the grass, and felt it, surprise, the stillness before the tide shifts. Some stories start with a letter. Mine was just getting to the reply. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. Not the polite kind you use for neighbors or delivermen, prize, but the slow, deliberate kind that says, "I know you're awake." I was sitting at the kitchen table with the porch light still burning. It's a habit I've had since Linda passed. Leave it on, surprise, just in case someone I love finds their way home in the dark. Rosa had gone back to her place hours earlier. After another long walk along the property line, she'd said, "Get some rest." And I'd nodded, prize, but rest wasn't in the cards. My mind kept circling the same thought. Michael didn't think I'd push back. When I opened the door, he was standing there, hands in his coat pockets, prize. Eyes too alert for someone who claimed to be just checking in. "You shouldn't be awake this late," he said. I leaned on the doorframe, prize. "And you shouldn't be here unless you've got something to say." He glanced past me into the house as if taking inventory. "We need to talk about the move." I stepped aside, let him in, prize. The floorboards under his shoes made the same creak they'd made when he was 17 and sneaking in past curfew. Back then, I'd wait up in the armchair, prize, pretending to read the paper until he mumbled an excuse. This time, there'd be no pretending. He sat at the table, eyes on the envelope still resting by my desk. "You've been busy," he said. Surprise, I poured him coffee without asking if he wanted any. "You didn't expect me to take it lying down, did you?" He smirked. Prize. I expected you to be reasonable." There it was, that word people use when what they really mean is compliant. I sat across from him. Reasonable doesn't mean silent, prize, and it sure as hell doesn't mean surrender. Michael's smile thinned. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Dad." I thought about the porch light, prize, about how it had burned for years through storms and long nights. "Maybe hard is what it needs to be," I said. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the maple branches against the siding. Inside, surprised, the air between us went still. I realized then the next move would decide whether this was a skirmish or a war. Michael cradled the coffee mug but didn't drink. His fingers drummed against the ceramic, prize, a rhythm that betrayed impatience more than thought. I've already made the deposit at the assisted living place, he said. They're holding the room for you. Prize, it's got a big window and a view of the garden. You'll like it. You make it sound like a vacation, I said. It is, in a way. You won't have to mow lawns, fix leaks. Prize, worry about taxes. I leaned forward. I want to mow my own lawn. I want to fix my own leaks. Taxes I could live without, but they're a part of keeping what's mine. Michael's jaw tightened. Prize, Dad, you're not seeing the bigger picture. This is about security. For you and for us. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Whose security? Because from where I'm sitting, surprise, you've secured yourself a house, my savings, and the freedom to call it practical. He exhaled sharply, the way he used to when I caught him lying about his grades. It's not like that. Surprise, you always told me family comes first. I did, I said quietly. But I didn't mean at the expense of someone else's dignity. He finally took a sip of coffee. Prize, his eyes never leaving mine. This doesn't have to turn ugly. Hoogly. I gave a short laugh. Michael, you've already taken my home on paper. What's left to take? The color off the walls. Prize. The air in my lungs. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished before I could hold on to it. You can't win this? He said flatly. Prize. I sat back in my chair, letting his words settle like dust. Maybe not, I said. But I can make sure you don't either. That was when his fingers stopped drumming. Prize. Michael's eyes drifted to the window, avoiding mine. The porch light spilled across the yard, carving the night into shadow and gold. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, he said finally. Prize. I waited. In my experience, when someone starts with that sentence, the rest is rarely in your favor. The business, it's been slow. Slower than I've told Janet. We took out loans, prize, and the payments. He stopped as if the words themselves weighed too much. If the bank forecloses, we lose the house. The kids lose their school. Prize, Janet loses her mind. So you decided to gamble with mine, I said. It wasn't gambling. It was reallocating. He said the word like it was a magic trick that could make the truth disappear. Prize. I thought I could keep up with your payments, keep you here, keep the bank off my back. But you couldn't. I finished for him. He rubbed his temple. When I realized I couldn't, Prize, I figured moving you would give us breathing room, one less expense. I didn't mean for it to feel like betrayal, I said, Prize. Because that's the word that comes to mind. Michael's shoulders sagged, the way they did when he was a boy caught with a broken window and a baseball in his hand. Prize. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd take it the wrong way. There's only one way to take being shoved out of your own home, Michael. The kettle on the stove began to hiss softly. Prize. Steam curling into the air like an unwelcome guest. I didn't move to turn it off. You had choices, I said. You could have come to me, laid it out. Prize, we might have found another way. I didn't want to look weak, he muttered. I leaned back, letting the chair creak under my weight. Prize, and now. He met my eyes for the first time since the conversation began. No, I just want it over with. The kettle whistled sharp and rising. Neither of us moved. Prize, I let the kettle scream until the sound became part of the moment, a shrill backdrop to the kind of silence you don't break with small talk. Then, without taking my eyes off Michael, I rose, Prize, turned off the burner and poured the boiling water into 2 mugs, one for him, one for me. You think I'm cornered, I said, sliding the mug toward him. Prize. But you've forgotten something. He frowned. What's that? I built this place. Every nail, every beam, every inch of it passed through my hands. And I kept every receipt, every blueprint. Surprise, every photograph of me doing it. His brow furrowed. So, I said, taking a slow sip. I know this house better than the county records do. Prize. And I know which parts of it can't be touched. Not legally, not without my say-so. Michael leaned back in his chair. You're bluffing. I smiled, surprised, the kind of smile you give when you've already moved your piece on the chessboard, and your opponent hasn't seen it yet. If I were bluffing, surprise, you'd already be holding the winning hand. He didn't respond, but I caught it. The twitch at the corner of his mouth, the dart of his eyes toward the desk where I kept my files. I stood, Prize, walked to the porch, and flicked the light switch off, plunging the yard into darkness. Then I turned it back on. You see that? I asked. Michael's gaze followed the glow spilling across the grass. Prize? That light stays on every night, I said. It's not just a habit, it's a signal. It says I'm still here, still watching, still deciding. And as long as it's on, surprise, you don't get to write the ending. He looked at me for a long moment, and I knew. He wasn't sure anymore who was holding the stronger position. After Michael left, the house was too quiet. Surprise, the kind of quiet that presses against your ribs, making it hard to breathe. I walked from room to room, my hand grazing the walls. Every dent, every scratch told a story. Michael's first attempt at carrying in the Christmas tree, Linda's ladder slipping when she hung the curtains, the night we painted the kitchen and left streaks where we'd run out of light. These weren't just marks on wood. They were proof that we had been here together. I stopped by the window, watching his taillights disappear down the road. The porch light burned on, casting its steady circle on the grass. I thought about what he'd said, that he didn't want to look weak. Maybe that was our problem all along. We'd mistaken vulnerability for weakness and silence for peace. I had been quiet for too long. The porch light wasn't just for Michael anymore. It was for me. I promised to myself that as long as it was on, I wasn't done fighting. In the distance, the wind carried the faint hum of an approaching storm. Not the kind that scatters leaves and bends branches, but the kind that changes the shape of the shore when it's over. I didn't know exactly how I'd win, but I knew this. Michael had made his move, and now it was my turn to play the long game. And when I did, the porch light would still be burning. The sky had been a bruise for days, swollen with low gray clouds that pressed down on the town like a weight. Every morning, I'd open the curtains and watch the first drops fall, tapping the roof like fingers drumming a warning. I felt the storm long before it arrived. Not just the weather, but the storm in my chest, the one that was born from letters, lies, and lost trust. Rosa called that morning, her voice steady but concerned. "You've got to be careful, Dennis." Michael's not backing down. "I know," I said. "Neither am I." I sat on the porch, the light flickering above me, watching the wind twist the branches of the maple tree. Each gust felt like a whispered promise, a warning that the quiet days were over. The neighbors were boarding up windows, stocking up on supplies. I thought about the house, the money, the memories, and the battle that was coming. The storm was coming, and it was not just in the sky. The morning stretched gray and cold, like a canvas washed in watercolors, too heavy to dry. I was making my coffee when the phone rang, the sharp, insistent ring that made the silence snap. I recognized the number before I even looked. Michael. I hesitated. Should I answer? Surprised. Maybe letting it ring was a small rebellion, a way to control the uncontrollable. But I picked up. "Dad," his voice was tight-clipped. "We need to talk." The bank's sending the foreclosure notice. I felt the weight of those words settle over me like the first snow of winter. Foreclosure. The word echoed through the empty rooms of my mind. Reverberating in memories I thought were mine to keep. "How did it come to this?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Things didn't go as planned. Janet and I tried to keep everything afloat." But the payments piled up faster than we could handle. I pictured the house, the garden, the creaking porch steps, all threatened by a piece of paper. "Have you thought about how this affects me?" I said, voice shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said finally. "I never wanted you to get hurt, but the damage was done." Michael's apology hung in the air, fragile and heavy at once. I wanted to believe him, to reach through the crack in his voice and find the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the son who once traced my wrinkles like they were a map to a better future. But time and silence have a way of hardening even the softest memories. "I'm not sure there's a way back from this," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "You have to try," he said. For us. I looked out the window, watching the first flakes begin to fall. Light almost hesitant, like they didn't know what was coming either. "Try," I echoed. "Try means hope, Michael." But hope needs a foundation. What foundation do I have left? He was quiet, and I knew he had no answer. The storm was not just outside, it was inside me, swirling through years of love, betrayal, sacrifice, and loss. But as the snow settled, so did a quiet resolve. I would fight, not just for a house or savings, but for the dignity that no foreclosure could ever erase. That evening, after the phone call, I sat alone by the fireplace, the orange flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. The letter Michael had left on the table was folded neatly in my pocket, a reminder of the battle ahead. I thought about Linda, her hands rough from years of gardening, her laughter echoing through these rooms. She had faced storms of her own. Life had never been gentle with us. But she taught me that strength was often silent, not loud. I picked up my phone and dialed an old number, my lawyer from years ago. "Dennis," he said, surprised. "It's been a while. I need your help," I said simply. There's a foreclosure notice, but it's not the end of the story. As we talked, I felt a flicker of hope. I had paperwork, receipts, prize photographs, proof that the house was more than just a title deed. It was a lifetime of work, a legacy not so easily taken. The next morning, Prize Rosa stopped by with a folder full of documents she'd found in the attic, tax returns, loan statements, letters from banks. Together, Prize, we began piecing the story of what had been done and what could be undone. The fight was no longer just about property. It was about reclaiming a voice that had been silenced. Days turned into weeks. Prize and the storm outside raged on. The snow piled higher, covering the world in white silence, but inside, the air was thick with planning, hope, and quiet determination. Rosa and I sifted through every paper, Prize every faded receipt, searching for the pieces of a puzzle that might save what we had left. It was exhausting work, physically and emotionally, but it reminded me of building the house itself slow, Prize, deliberate, and with a purpose. I learned that sometimes the fiercest storms aren't the ones that come from the sky, but those that come from the people you once trusted most, Prize. But as long as the porch light burned, I had a beacon to guide me through the darkness. And as long as I could hold on to that light, there was still a chance for dawn. Prize. The morning sun broke through thin curtains, casting long, cold shadows across the empty kitchen. The house was too quiet, too still, the kind of silence that presses heavy on the chest. I sipped my coffee slowly, the bitter warmth a small comfort in a day that promised battles ahead. Rosa had stopped by early, her eyes bright but tired. "Ready for today?" she asked. I nodded, Prize, feeling the weight of years settle squarely on my shoulders. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day I stopped being the silent victim and started becoming the man who fought back. The phone rang. Prize, sharp and unexpected. It was my lawyer. "We've got a hearing date," he said. "In 3 weeks. Enough time to prepare, or not enough to save what I'd built." Prize. I looked out the window at the porch light, still burning, still steady. It was more than a light. It was a promise. The days leading to the hearing felt like walking a tightrope stretched over a dark abyss. Prize, every step required balance. Too much emotion and I'd fall, too little and I'd lose the fight. Rosa became my anchor. Together we dug through the attic, old filing cabinets, Prize, and dusty boxes, remnants of decades packed away in the rush of life. We uncovered faded photographs of the house under construction, letters from contractors praising my work, canceled checks signed by me, Prize, and tax documents showing years of steady payments. Each paper was a thread in the fabric of my life, proof that the house was more than a transaction. It was a legacy. One afternoon, Prize, as rain streaked down the windows, Rosa found a leather-bound journal. Inside were entries I hadn't read in years. Notes Linda kept about the house, the family, and our dreams. Reading her words, surprise, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This fight wasn't just for me, but for her memory and the truth we built together. The hearing was looming, Prize, but so was a chance to reclaim more than property, to reclaim respect. Michael's calls became more frequent, his tone shifting from distant to desperate. I didn't answer most of them. But one evening, surprised, the phone rang again. I picked up, stealing myself. "Dad, please," he said. "Can we meet, talk things through?" I paused, then agreed. We met at a small cafe, Prize, neutral ground, the kind of place where strangers can sit and speak without history pressing on their shoulders. Michael looked tired, worn by months of stress and mistakes. "I'm sorry," he said, surprise, voice raw. "I messed up. I should have been honest." I listened, letting the weight of his words sink in. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was necessary. That day we didn't solve everything, Prize, but we began to build a bridge, fragile, tentative, but real. A week after our meeting, Rosa called with surprising news. "Dennis, Prize, you're not alone in this." She had spoken to an old friend from the bank, someone who'd quietly kept tabs on the account, uneasy about the sudden changes. "She's willing to testify," Rosa said. Surprise. "She remembers you the way you always paid on time. She says what's happened doesn't add up." Hope blossomed where I thought there was only frost. With new evidence and an unexpected ally, Prize, the scales might finally begin to tip. I felt the porch light burn brighter that night. Not just a beacon, but a signal the fight wasn't over. As the days ticked closer to the hearing, Prize, I found a strange peace amidst the chaos. This wasn't just a battle for a house or bank accounts. It was a fight for dignity, for respect, surprise, for the right to be heard. A right too many people take for granted until it's almost gone. I thought about Linda, about Rosa, about the years of laughter and struggle we shared under this roof. Prize. That history was mine, no matter what the papers said. And so I would stand firm, not just for the walls, but for the memories, for the future, and for the man I still was beneath it all. Because sometimes, Prize, the fiercest battles are fought not with anger, but with quiet strength. The courthouse loomed like an old sentinel, its stone facade weathered by decades of battles fought within. I stood at its step, surprised, the cold morning air biting at my cheeks, a weight heavier than the winter chill settling in my chest. Inside, voices murmured in the hallways, some sharp, some wary. I could feel eyes on me, some curious, Prize, some skeptical. But I held my head high. This was more than a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning. The judge's gavel struck, calling the room to order. The case was called, Floors v. Floors. Prize Michael sat across the room, his expression unreadable but tense. Janet beside him, her eyes flicking to me with a mix of disdain and pity. As the evidence was laid bare, papers, photographs, Prize testimony, I felt each moment stretch and fold, a tapestry of truth slowly weaving itself. The house, my home, was on trial. The courtroom buzzed quietly as witnesses were called. Rosa took the stand first. Prize, her voice was steady, but I could see the strain behind her eyes. She recounted the years of payments, the loans, the sacrifices made by our family. Next, surprised, the bank employee testified. The unexpected ally Rosa had found. Her testimony cracked the foundation of Michael's claims. She spoke of irregularities, of rushed paperwork. Prize, of a client uneasy with the transactions. Michael's lawyer tried to undermine the witnesses, casting doubt and suspicion, but the evidence was like a river carving through stone, relentless and undeniable. Prize, sitting there, I felt something I hadn't in months, hope. Michael took the stand. His usual confident mask was cracked, revealing vulnerability beneath. I made mistakes, he said quietly. Prize. I didn't want to hurt my father. I thought I was protecting my family, but I was wrong. There was a pause. A weighty silence filled the room. He looked directly at me. Surprise. I hope you can forgive me someday. The judge nodded, signaling the gravity of the moment. I realized then this hearing wasn't just about property. It was about healing, fragile, painful, but real. Surprised, the room was still when the judge finally spoke. The evidence presented shows a complex situation involving family and finances. However, it is clear that Mr. Floors, Sir, Prize, has a legitimate claim to the property and financial accounts in question. Murmurs swept through the courtroom. Michael's shoulders sagged as if a weight had been lifted, or perhaps shifted. The judge continued, I am ordering a temporary injunction to prevent any further transfer of assets until a full investigation is completed. For the first time in months, Prize, I felt the house breathe again, like it was waking from a long sleep. As I left the courthouse, the cold air felt different, sharper, cleaner, as if the city itself had taken a breath. This was not the end, Prize, but a beginning. A chance to rebuild what had been shaken, to restore not just walls and deeds, but trust and respect. I thought about the years ahead, long uncertain, but I was no longer alone. Prize. Rosa stood by my side, and even Michael had begun to understand the weight of what he risked losing. Sometimes the fiercest storms teach us how to stand firmer than ever before. Prize. And under the steady glow of the porch light, I vowed to stand tall, no matter what came next. The morning after the hearing, the phone rang early. Too early for good news or soft words. It was Michael. His voice was hesitant, almost unfamiliar. Dad, can we talk? I hesitated. For years our conversations had been battlegrounds, each word a weapon. But maybe this time, Prize, we could try something different, I agreed. The conversation that followed was awkward but honest. A slow unwrapping of years of misunderstanding, pain, and unspoken regrets. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, Prize, but it was a start. Michael's voice trembled slightly as if he was speaking through years of silence. I know I hurt you, he said. Not just with the house, but with everything. Prize was scared of failing, scared of losing you. I listened, feeling the weight of unspoken fears between us. The house had been more than bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of family, trust, pride, and sacrifice. I was wrong, he continued, and I want to make things right. For the first time, I saw not the son who'd betrayed me, but the man trying to heal the wounds. It was fragile, surprise, like a thin thread in a storm, but it was there. In the days that followed our talk, Michael started showing up more often. Not just with words, but with actions. Fixing the leaking faucet in the kitchen, Prize. Helping Rosa with the garden, even bringing over coffee just the way I liked it. It was awkward at first. Old wounds don't heal overnight. But little by little, Prize, the silence between us filled with shared moments and not a smile, a memory recalled. One evening as the sun dipped low, he sat beside me on the porch. I want to help rebuild, he said. Prize, and in that simple sentence I found hope, a chance to reclaim what we'd lost. One afternoon, as we cleared out the basement together, Prize, Michael uncovered a box of old family photos and letters. things I'd thought were lost or forgotten. We sat on the floor, flipping through images of birthdays, holidays, prize, and everyday moments filled with laughter and love. He looked at me and said, "I forgot how much this meant." I smiled, feeling the weight of years lift just a little. Prize, it wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the family we could still be, if we chose to. Rebuilding a bridge takes more than a single step. It takes patience, effort, prize, and the willingness to face past mistakes. Michael and I were starting that journey. We weren't perfect, and the scars of the past still lingered. But as I looked at the photographs, prize, I realized that love had never truly left us. It was buried beneath misunderstandings and hurt, waiting for us to find it again. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. Prize, it was my 73rd birthday, and for the first time in years I felt a flicker of excitement. Michael had called the night before, promising a small surprise. Rosa baked a cake with extra frosting, surprise humming softly in the kitchen. When Michael arrived, he carried a small, carefully wrapped box. Not the usual hurried gift, but something with thought behind it. I took the box, fingers trembling slightly. Prize, inside I found a letter. And something else, something I wasn't expecting. I unfolded the letter carefully, feeling the weight of each word before I read it. Surprise, Michael wrote about regrets and hopes, about how he had taken the wrong path but wanted to make amends. He admitted mistakes he hadn't voiced before. The financial strain, the hurtful choices, prize, the distance he'd put between us. But then, tucked beneath the letter was a small key, old, tarnished, with a faded tag, "For when you're ready." My heart raced. What door could this key open? Prize. Michael's eyes met mine, hopeful and unsure. "I want to show you something," he said quietly. Michael led me to the old workshop behind the house, a place I hadn't been in years. The door was locked, prize, but the key fit perfectly. Inside was a room frozen in time, tools hung neatly on the walls, a workbench covered in sawdust, unfinished projects waiting for a hand to guide them home. Prize. "This was your sanctuary," Michael said softly. "I thought you might want it back." I ran my hands over the worn wood, memories flooding back. Mornings spent building, afternoons teaching, surprise evenings dreaming. For the first time in a long while I felt a flicker of belonging. Over the following days I spent hours in the workshop, surprise dusting off tools and picking up projects where I left off years ago. Rosa brought me coffee and Michael offered to help, clumsy at first but eager. We built a small bench together. A simple thing, prize, but it felt monumental. With each stroke of the sandpaper, with every careful measurement, I felt the distance between us shrink. The workshop wasn't just a room, prize, it was a bridge, one I was willing to cross again and again. Sometimes healing doesn't come from words alone. It comes from picking up the pieces, the tools, the memories, prize, the moments, and building something new. The workshop reminded me that even broken things can be repaired, reshaped, made whole again. And maybe, just maybe, so can families. Prize. The road back to forgiveness is never straight or smooth. It winds through memories, regrets, and moments where the heart hesitates. That morning I woke up with a sense of unease. Michael hadn't called. Surprise, Rosa was quiet, thoughtful. The house felt emptier than usual, the kind of silence that makes you listen harder to your own thoughts. I knew the road ahead would be long, prize, but I was ready to walk it step by step with patience and hope. The days stretched on with a quiet heaviness. Michael was around less, caught up in work and his own tangled thoughts. Rosa and I filled the silence with small routines. Watering plants, fixing leaky faucets, sharing meals that reminded me of better times. Yet beneath the calm, surprise, I could feel the tension simmering, the fragile peace waiting to be tested. One afternoon, a letter arrived, unsigned, no return address. Inside, just 3 words, "I'm sorry, prize." Dad, the handwriting was familiar, yet distant. Hope and uncertainty tangled in my chest as I folded the note carefully. That evening I found Michael in the workshop, prize, staring at the half-finished bench we'd started together. He looked up when I entered, eyes clouded with a mixture of guilt and longing. "I'm trying," he said softly, prize. "I don't want to lose you." I nodded, sitting beside him. "Trying is where it begins." We talked for hours. About mistakes, hopes, and the years we'd lost. Prize. The bridge between us was still fragile, but it was there, built on honesty, effort, and a shared desire to heal. Days later, Michael surprised me by fixing the porch light. Prize, the old bulb had flickered for weeks, a quiet symbol of neglect and fading hope. He climbed the ladder carefully, his hands steady but his heart uncertain. When the light finally glowed bright and steady, surprise, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years, a sign that maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back. The porch light wasn't just a lamp, it was a beacon. A signal that no matter how far we'd drifted, prize, there was still a way home. Healing isn't a race or a destination. It's a series of small steps taken in the dark, guided by patience and the faintest glimmers of hope. Pride. That porch light, flickering back to life, reminded me that even the longest journeys begin with a single moment of courage. And no matter how far apart we drift, prize the light we keep burning can lead us home. Spring had a way of sneaking in quietly, softening the edges of a long, cold winter with tentative warmth. The maple outside my window began to swell with buds, the first whispers of green teasing the gray branches. It reminded me that even the hardest seasons eventually give way to new life. The house felt different, too, not just because of the change outside, probably because inside something had shifted. The heavy silence that had once pressed against my chest was lighter, almost hopeful. Rosa was busy making plans, her enthusiasm infectious. We're throwing a garden party, she said, eyes bright.
Just family.
No agendas, no old wounds to reopen, just time to be together. Michael, ever cautious but trying, was on board. He wanted to make this right, to bridge the gap between past mistakes and future possibilities. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open the door all the way, but the steady glow of the porch light reminded me that sometimes the first step is simply showing up. I spent mornings on the porch, watching the world awake. The creak of the old swing, the scent of damp earth, the soft chatter of neighbors, all small comforts that stitched together a fragile piece. And as the sun climbed higher, I found myself willing to believe that a new season had begun, not just in the yard but in my heart. The days leading up to the garden party were filled with quiet anticipation. Rosa took charge of the flowers, planting tulips and daffodils along the walkway, their colors a promise of brighter days. She hummed softly as she worked. A song I hadn't heard in years. One Linda used to sing. Michael busied himself cleaning the house and fixing the creaky gate, his movements tentative but determined. I found myself pacing the porch, hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee, wondering if this gathering would be the healing balm we needed or a reopening of old wounds. One afternoon, Michael approached me, holding a worn photograph of our family from years ago. "Do you remember this day?" he asked. I nodded, the edges of my memory blurring with warmth. He smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. I want to get back to that. Maybe it's not too late. I looked at him long and hard, searching for the boy who once called me Dad without hesitation. Maybe spring wasn't just outside. Maybe it was beginning here too. The day of the garden party arrived with a sky so blue it seemed almost impossible after the long winter. Gifts began to trickle in, old friends, distant relatives, neighbors who had watched the house through the years. I stood by the porch watching faces I hadn't seen in months, some with warmth, others with cautious smiles. Michael appeared beside me, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, a small gesture but one that carried more weight than words. Rosa welcomed everyone with her usual grace, making sure no one felt like a stranger. As the sun dipped low, the laughter grew louder, stories were shared, and for a moment, the past seemed to fade into the background. I realized that this gathering was more than a party. It was a turning point. As twilight deepened, I found myself in a quiet corner with Michael's sister, Linda, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. Her eyes held a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "You've both been through a lot," she said softly. We talked about the past, the misunderstandings, the pain, and the years lost to silence. "I've missed this," she admitted, the family. The chance to just be together. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. A crack in the walls we'd built around ourselves. Maybe this new season was not just about healing, but about rebuilding, together. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to open the door, not just to others, but to forgiveness and possibility. The garden party wasn't just a gathering of people. It was a beginning, a choice to let go of old hurts and welcome new hope. As the porch light glowed softly in the evening, I realized that the true strength of family isn't in perfection, but in the willingness to try again. And that, more than anything, is the gift we give ourselves. The dawn broke soft and pale, but inside me, the weight of promises made and broken lingered like a shadow refusing to lift. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, watching the steam curl upward and dissolve into the air. Michael hadn't called. Not that morning, not the day before. Silence was thick between us, sometimes comforting, sometimes painful. Rosa's voice was a gentle reminder when she called to check in. Patience, Dennis. Healing takes time. But some promises felt like they could break at any moment, like fragile glass on the edge of the table. I wondered if the promise I made to rebuild, to forgive, to move forward was one I could keep. The phone rang just as I was about to set down my empty cup. It was Michael. His voice was tentative, cautious, but there was something new, an edge of sincerity I hadn't heard in a long time. "Dad, I'm coming over. There's something I need to show you." I hesitated only a moment before saying yes. When he arrived, he held a small package wrapped in brown paper, tied with a simple string. "Open it," he said. Inside was an old photo album, worn at the edges, filled with pictures of family moments. Birthdays, holidays, summer afternoons. We sat together, flipping through pages, the past laid bare between us, fragile but alive. As we turned each page, stories unfolded, laughter caught in frozen moments, faces bright with hope and love. Michael pointed to a photo of Linda baking cookies with flour dusting her hair. "I remember that day," he said softly. "You were so proud." I smiled, feeling the ache of years slip away just for a moment. "It's not too late," I whispered, "to make new memories." He nodded, eyes glistening with something like hope. For the first time in a long while, I believed we could keep the promise we made. To heal, to forgive, and to move forward together. Days passed with quiet moments of connection. A shared cup of coffee, a phone call, a brief hug goodbye. Michael began volunteering at the community center where Rosa taught woodworking. He wasn't perfect, still fumbling with old mistakes and new responsibilities. But he was showing up, and that mattered. The workshop buzzed with life again, echoing with laughter and the scent of fresh pine. It was more than wood and nails. It was rebuilding family one day at a time. Healing isn't a straight path. It's messy, uneven, and sometimes painful. But promises, especially those made from the heart, are powerful. They remind us that even after the darkest winters, spring can come. That forgiveness can grow from the smallest seed, and that family, with all its flaws and struggles, can find its way back. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, but inside the house, the air was heavy, thick with anticipation and unspoken questions. Michael stood at the kitchen window, eyes distant, jaw clenched as if wrestling with a decision that could shift the course of everything. From I watched him from across the room, remembering the boy who once looked at me with unshakable trust, and wondering how far we'd drifted since then. The porch light flickered outside, steady as ever, a silent witness to the crossroads we now faced. "Dad," Michael finally said, breaking the silence. "I need to tell you something." He took a deep breath and sat down, his hands trembling slightly. "There's something I've been hiding, something that's been eating at me for months." I leaned forward, heart pounding. "It's about the business," he said quietly. "We're deeper in debt than I told anyone. I was afraid to face it, to tell you." The weight of his confession settled between us like a storm cloud, dark and heavy. "I don't want to lose everything, not just the company, but our family." We talked for hours about failures, fears, and the fragile threads holding us together. I shared my own regrets, my own mistakes, and the toll silence had taken on me. For the first time in a long time, we weren't just father and son. We were two men facing the truth together. As Michael spoke, I saw not just a man burdened by debt, but a son desperate to make things right. "We can't keep pretending this will fix itself," I said gently. "We need a plan, honest and clear." He nodded, relief and fear mingling in his eyes. "I've been talking to a financial advisor," he confessed. "There might be options, restructuring, selling assets." We started mapping possibilities on a scrap of paper, our words tentative but purposeful. It was awkward, this new dance of partnership, but it felt right. For the first time, I believed we could face the storm not as adversaries, but as family. Days turned into nights filled with long talks and restless thoughts. Michael and I met with advisors, crunching numbers and weighing options that felt like choosing between survival and surrender. One evening, he looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, I think we have to let go of some things, maybe even the house." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The house wasn't just a building. It was a testament to decades of love and sacrifice. But sometimes love means knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I nodded slowly, the weight of the decision settling deep inside. In the quiet that followed, I realized that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is release what we can't control. Michael and I began to talk about what home really meant. Not walls or land, but family, memory, and the ties that bind us through hardship. We made a pact to face whatever came together, no matter how hard or uncertain. The porch light outside continued to glow softly, a reminder that even in darkness, there is a steady light to guide us. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead us to growth. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making space for something new. And sometimes the greatest strength lies in embracing uncertainty with an open heart. Prize. As the porch light burns steady through the night, so too does hope, guiding us through the crossroads and toward a new beginning. Shot at R12 Terabiabieldieg, the morning air was crisp as I stepped into the workshop, a place both familiar and foreign. The tools, once silent, awaited their call to life. Wood to be shaped, surprise, nails to be driven, and wounds to be healed. Michael stood beside me, a silent promise in his eyes. Today we began rebuilding, not just the house, but the bridges between us. Surprise, the first swing of the hammer echoed louder than I expected, a sound that stirred memories and hopes alike. Day by day, Michael and I worked together, our hands busy with the rhythm of rebuilding. Surprise, we measured twice, cut once, and learned to listen, not just to each other, but to the silence that spoke between us. Prize, the workshop was filled with the scent of fresh pine and the sound of wood meeting nails, a symphony of second chances. As we sanded the rough edges of the new bench, Prize, I felt something smoothing between us too, the roughness of old wounds giving way to something softer. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Sometimes our old frustrations flared, words left unspoken, mistakes repeated. But with every moment, I remembered Linda's quiet wisdom, that patience was a kind of love, slow and steady. Michael began to open up more, Prize sharing fears and hopes beneath the dust and splinters. Together we weren't just fixing wood, we were shaping a future. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the workshop, Prize, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was Linda's old friend, Mrs. Peterson, a woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile. Prize. She brought with her a box of old letters and photographs, relics from times when the family was whole and hope was plentiful. Her presence was a gentle reminder that we were not alone in this journey. Prize. The past and present converged in the dust-filled air, weaving stories of lost love and renewal. Rebuilding is never just about structures. It's about people, memories, surprise, and the ties that bind us through time. Sometimes a stranger's kindness can open doors to forgotten parts of ourselves, and in those moments healing begins. Together, with patience and love, Prize, we can rebuild what was broken, stronger, deeper, and more beautiful than before. The house had grown quieter over the past few weeks. The stillness wasn't peaceful. Prize. It was heavy with memories that seemed to seep from the very walls. The kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes the hours drag longer than they should. Prize. It wasn't just the absence of noise, but the presence of ghosts. Echoes of laughter, tears, arguments, and moments so tender they could only be felt in the spaces between words. That evening, Prize, as the sun dipped low behind the old maple tree, casting long shadows across the living room floor, I found myself drawn to the window. The fading light painted everything with a soft, melancholy glow. Prize, I sat there, the fabric of my chair rough against my skin, my eyes tracing the familiar contours of the yard, but my mind wandering back decades. Suddenly, Prize, a soft creak echoed from the hallway, the familiar sound of floorboards that had borne witness to years of life. It startled me, not because it was loud, Prize, but because it carried the weight of every step taken in haste, joy, anger, or sorrow. It was a sound that took me back to moments I thought I had buried deep, childhood birthdays, Christmas mornings. Prize. Whispered conversations late at night. Memories flooded in. The way Linda's laughter had filled this house. Bright and unrestrained, the smell of her baking filling the kitchen. Surprise, the quiet conversations held in the dark when words were too heavy to say aloud. But alongside those joyful memories, the painful ones surfaced too. The silences that grew between us, Prize. The misunderstandings that festered, the trust broken in small, sharp ways. I realized that healing was not merely about creating new memories or moving on from the past, Prize. It was about confronting the ghosts that lingered, the shadows that slipped through the cracks in the walls and settled in my heart. Healing demanded that I face the wounds hidden beneath years of silence, surprise, and that those wounds, once acknowledged, could begin to close. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared and the house settled into the quiet of night, I felt a chill run down my spine. Not from the cold, Prize, but from the truth that, to move forward, I must first walk through the shadows of the past. The next few days were marked by a strange restlessness. I found myself wandering through the rooms of the house, Prize, touching surfaces with reverence and sorrow. Each corner seemed to hold a memory, a fragment of a life once lived fully, now faded like the wallpaper peeling in the corners. Prize, Rosa noticed my quietness and offered gentle words. Sometimes the past speaks loudest in the silence. Michael seemed distant, as if wrestling with ghosts of his own. One afternoon, Prize, while searching for some old tools in the attic, he stumbled upon a weathered box filled with letters, photographs, and keepsakes. Relics from a time when our family was whole and hope seemed endless. Prize. We sat together in the fading light, opening the box carefully. Among the letters was one from Linda written years ago but never sent. Her handwriting was delicate yet firm, Prize, filled with hopes for reconciliation, fears of losing us, and a quiet plea for understanding. Reading her words, I felt the weight of love intertwined with regret pressing on my chest. Prize. It was a reminder that no matter how painful the past, it shaped the path we must now walk. We could not build a future without acknowledging what came before. The wounds needed to be seen, named, Prize, and honored if they were ever to heal. That evening, Michael and I sat late into the night, the faded letter from Linda resting between us like a fragile bridge spanning years of silence and distance. Prize. The dim light of the table lamp cast long shadows across the worn wood, mirroring the shadows in our hearts. We spoke slowly, deliberately, about mistakes made in anger. Prize. Words left unspoken out of pride or fear, and moments where trust had slipped through our fingers like fine sand. I never meant to shut you out, Michael said, his voice breaking slightly. Prize. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't heard in years. A raw, honest admission that felt more powerful than any apology. I know, I replied, voice steady but heavy with emotion. Prize. And I never stopped wanting to find my way back. For hours we traced the map of our fractured relationship, acknowledging the pain we had caused each other without intending to. Surprise, recognizing how silence had built walls between us. But beneath the weight of regret there was a flicker of something new, a fragile hope. The walls around us seemed thinner with each shared story, each tear, surprise, each quiet moment of understanding. The shadows that had once cloaked the room started to recede, replaced by the tentative glow of connection. In that room, in that night, Prize, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of healing is simply starting the conversation, laying bare the wounds and allowing light to reach where darkness has lingered too long. Days later, Prize. Michael suggested we visit a place Linda had often spoken about. The old park by the river where we'd spent countless summer afternoons. Surprised, the thought of returning to that place felt both daunting and necessary, like stepping back into a storybook filled with faded pages waiting to be rewritten. When we arrived, surprised, the park was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The river gurgled softly, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets only nature knows. Prize, we stood there quietly absorbing the familiar sights and sounds. Michael broke the silence first. I remember teaching the kids to fish here, he said softly. Linda loved watching them learn. Prize. She said this place was where life seemed to make sense. I nodded, feeling the memories wash over me like the river's steady flow. Standing there, surrounded by the echoes of past joys and sorrows, Prize, I felt a fragile connection rekindled, one that was real and grounding, even if tentative. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, I understood something profound. Prize, even the darkest shadows eventually give way to light. Sometimes it just takes patience, courage, and the willingness to face those shadows together. Prize. Healing is not about forgetting the shadows we carry within us, nor is it about pretending the pain never existed. It is instead an act of courage. To face those shadows head on with honesty, humility, prize, and a willingness to forgive. The past is a powerful force. It shapes who we are, the wounds we bear, and the walls we build around our hearts. But the past does not have to imprison us. Surprise, by choosing to walk through the darkness together, bearing one another's burdens, sharing stories of hurt and hope, we find a path toward light. And sometimes, Prize. The bravest thing we can do is to stand within those shadows and say, I am ready to heal. As I stood beside Michael in the park, watching the sky deepen into night, Prize, I felt a quiet certainty that the journey ahead, though long and uncertain, was one we would face together. The days following our visit to the park felt different. Quieter, yes, Prize, but charged with a subtle energy. The heaviness that had lingered in the house seemed to lift little by little, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, Prize, the past could become a foundation rather than a prison. Michael and I began to open more doors, not just literal doors in the house, but doors of communication long closed. We revisited old albums, Prize, reread letters, and shared memories both joyful and painful. These moments were often bittersweet, tears mingling with laughter, regrets balanced by gratitude. One afternoon, Prize, while sorting through a box of Linda's things, I found a journal she'd kept. Her handwriting was careful and poetic, filled with reflections on love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Prize, I read aloud passages that spoke of hope even in the darkest hours, and Michael listened, his eyes softening as if hearing her voice once again. But it became clear that healing was not a destination but a process, a continuous unfolding of understanding, forgiveness, and love. The shadows of the past would never vanish entirely, Prize, but they could grow less frightening when met with compassion. I realized that the hardest part was not confronting the pain itself, but allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough to seek connection beyond it. Prize. One evening, sitting on the porch as the stars twinkled overhead, I felt the presence of those who had come before us. Linda's gentle spirit, the laughter of children who had grown, Prize, and the promise of new beginnings. In that moment, I understood that the past, with all its shadows, had also brought us here, to this fragile, beautiful place of healing. And that was enough. Hector. For Tichibir Akanantha, the house held its breath, as if waiting for something to break the fragile peace. It was a morning like any other, Prize, yet the air felt charged, heavy with tension beneath the surface calm. Michael was distant, his smiles thin and fleeting. I could feel the weight he carried. Prize, the secrets he kept locked away behind tired eyes. Something was coming, and I wasn't sure if we were ready to face it. That afternoon, the tension finally broke. Michael sat me down, Prize, his hands trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, voice barely above a whisper. I braced myself, heart pounding. He confessed mistakes made, decisions taken in desperation, secrets kept to protect, but which only widened the gap between us. The words were painful, but necessary. Surprise, I faced the fractures in our relationship head-on, raw and unfiltered. The truth hit hard like a storm ripping through fragile glass. We talked for hours about regrets, fears, surprise, and the walls we'd built to keep pain at bay. Tears were shed, anger released, and apologies whispered into the quiet. In the wreckage of broken trust, we found a strange kind of clarity. Prize, it was a breaking point, but also a beginning. In the wake of the confrontation, a choice lay before us: to let the fractures deepen or to start mending. Michael reached out his hand, tentative but sincere. "I want to try," he said, "to rebuild, to be better." I took his hand, feeling the warmth of hope against the cold weight of past hurts. Prize, that moment marked a turning point, where forgiveness began not as a word but as an action. Forgiveness is not forgetting nor excusing mistakes. It is the strength to see beyond the hurt, surprise, to embrace the flawed humanity in those we love. At the breaking point, we find the chance to choose love over anger, hope over despair. And in that choice, healing truly begins. Surprise. The late autumn evening settled in like a thick woolen blanket, the chill seeping quietly into the bones of the old house. Outside, the trees stood bare, surprise, their skeletal branches silhouetted against a slate gray sky, whispering stories of seasons past and those yet to come. Inside, I sat alone by the fireplace. Prize, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, warm yet fragile against the creeping cold. Prize. The house was filled with a quiet stillness that carried with it a peculiar kind of loneliness, a pause between the cacophony of days gone by and the uncertain rhythm of what was to come. Prize. It was a silence thick with memories, heavy with the weight of years, filled with both love and loss. As I sat there, lost in thought, a sound stirred me. A hesitant, tentative knocking at the door. Prize. It was a simple sound, yet it reverberated through the hollow spaces of the house and the chambers of my heart. I rose slowly, every step weighted by a mix of anticipation and dread. Prize, my pulse quickening as I wondered who could be calling at such an hour. The knock repeated, gentle but insistent. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the doorknob. Prize, the moment felt suspended in time, caught between hope and fear, between the familiar and the unknown. Opening the door, my breath caught. Standing there, Prize, framed by the dim porch light and the darkened night beyond, was Michael. His face was drawn, his eyes tired but bright with something I hadn't seen for years, hope. "Dad," he said quietly, surprise voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, a simple gesture that felt like a doorway opening, not just to my son, but to a future neither of us dared hope for until this very moment. Prize, Michael crossed the threshold and entered the living room, his footsteps soft on the aged wooden floor. The fire crackled beside us. Prize, its warmth a fragile shield against the chill that lingered in the room in between us. We sat together in the quiet, the flickering flames illuminating the lines etched by time and regret on both our faces. Surprised, the words hung heavy in the air before he finally broke the silence. "I've made mistakes," he began, voice trembling with the weight of years of unspoken apologies. "Things I wish I could take back." Prize, things I didn't know how to say or admit. His eyes searched mine for a sign of forgiveness, a flicker of understanding. I nodded slowly. Prize, the pain of the past stirring in my chest, but tempered by the unexpected courage of this moment. "I'm here now," he continued. "Not just with words, but ready to make things right." "Prize, if you'll let me." The hope in his voice was fragile yet powerful. Prize, and as I looked at him, this man who was once a boy I had cradled, I felt the first stirrings of a bridge spanning the gulf of years in silence. The conversation that followed was raw and unguarded. Prize, we revisited moments both joyful and painful. Years of silence, missed birthdays, broken promises, and wounds inflicted by pride and misunderstanding. Michael spoke of his regrets. Prize, the nights spent wrestling with guilt and loneliness, the desire to reconnect, but the fear of rejection. I shared my own loneliness, the quiet ache of watching a son grow distant. Prize, the struggle to keep hope alive amidst disappointment. Tears came unbidden, mingling with moments of laughter born from shared memories that refused to be forgotten. Prize, the walls we'd built around our hearts began to crumble, replaced by tentative openness and a fragile trust. It was the first time in years that we truly faced each other, not as estranged family members, Prize, but as two flawed men seeking to heal. In the quiet that settled after the storm of confession, Michael reached across the space between us and took my hand. His grip was steady, Prize, filled with promise and vulnerability. "Let's try again, Dad," he said simply. "One step at a time." That simple act, offering his hand and hope, felt like a seed planted in fertile ground. Prize. We talked long into the night, not just about the past, but about the future, about rebuilding, reconnecting, and rediscovering what family could mean. The night air grew colder, but inside, Prize, a small fire burned brighter, a fire of reconciliation, of second chances. Reconciliation is not a final destination, but a journey, one marked by patience, humility, and courage. Prize. It demands opening your heart even when it's been broken, trusting again when trust has been shattered. But within those brave choices lies the possibility of healing, growth, and new beginnings. Surprise. Family is never perfect. It is the willingness to try again, to rise after falling, that defines it. In the weeks and months that followed, Michael and I took that journey one day at a time. Prize. We rebuilt trust not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent actions. Shared meals, honest conversations, moments of silence filled with understanding. Prize. The shadows of the past remained but grew lighter, no longer threats but reminders of how far we'd come. And as the seasons changed, so did we, transforming pain into strength, regret into hope. Prize. The unexpected reconciliation was not an end but a beginning, a new chapter written in forgiveness and love. The morning broke softly, the sun casting a gentle glow over the familiar landscape. Prize. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house felt like home, not just a structure, but a sanctuary. The air was filled with possibility, with the quiet promise of renewal. I stood at the window, surprised, watching the world wake up, feeling the weight of the past begin to lift. Today was different. Today was a new dawn. The day unfolded with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Prize. Michael and I spent the morning repairing the porch, a simple act that felt symbolic, a mending of more than just wood and nails. Rosa joined us, her smile warm and steady. Surprise, a reminder of the strength we'd found together. Neighbors stopped by, drawn by the sound of laughter and the sight of a family healing. It was in these small moments, the shared work, the smiles, Prize, the renewed bonds, I realized the depth of what had been rebuilt. As the sun climbed higher, Michael and I sat on the porch steps watching the world around us. We spoke not of the past, Prize, but of hopes and plans, of what life could be, built on a foundation of hard-won understanding. There was still work to be done, wounds to heal, and lessons to learn. But for the first time in a long time, Prize, the future felt bright, full of possibility, not regret. Just as the afternoon light began to soften, Prize, I found an envelope tucked beneath a loose floorboard. A letter addressed to me in Linda's handwriting. Inside were words of love, forgiveness, Prize, and hope, a final message meant to guide me through the shadows and into the light. Her words reminded me that even when we feel lost, we are never truly alone. That family in all its messy glory, Prize, is our greatest gift and our greatest challenge. Life is a series of dawns, moments of light breaking through the darkness. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we step into each new day. Surprise. Healing is messy and imperfect, but is also beautiful and transformative. Family is not about perfection, but about presence, about showing up again and again with open hearts. As the sun sets on the past, surprise, a new dawn rises full of hope, love, and the promise of tomorrow. Night was falling, but inside me a small flame was burning, a flame of forgiveness, hope, and new beginnings. With each day, Prize. Each moment, I realized that life isn't a straight line, but a spiral of falling down and rising up again. I remembered the lonely days, the times I felt abandoned and betrayed, Prize. But I also remembered Michael's first steps back to me. His honest words, warm handshakes, and the times we sat together in silence without needing to say a word. Family, in the end, Prize, is not a place without mistakes or pain, but a place where we choose to forgive and continue loving. It's a journey without end, and it's what makes life truly worthwhile. Prize. I looked out the window at the starry night sky, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would no longer be afraid. I had found strength and connection in love, surprise, and in the ability to rebuild from the ruins. And so a new chapter began, imperfect yet full of promise and meaning. Michael and I, together with those we hold dear, surprise, would continue writing our story, carrying lessons from the past and faith in the future. This story reminds us that no family is perfect. We all carry wounds, misunderstandings, surprise, and moments of silence that can feel like walls between us. But the true strength lies not in never falling, but in finding the courage to stand up again, to forgive, to reach out, and to rebuild. Prize. Healing is a journey that requires patience and humility. It asks us to face our past honestly, to accept the imperfections in ourselves and others, and to choose love even when it's difficult. Prize. If there's one thing this story teaches us, that it's never too late to begin again. No matter how deep the shadows, there is always a new dawn waiting to break. To anyone watching who feels broken, prize, abandoned, or lost, you are not alone. There is hope. There is strength within you to heal and to reconnect. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Prize. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe to Dad's Last Revenge to join us on more journeys of family, forgiveness, and healing. Prize, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own stories. Your voice matters, and together we can create a community of support and understanding. Thank you for watching, and remember, surprise, every new dawn begins with a single brave step.